have no idea how much I hate
you. Resident Evil Retrospective.
The Dreamcast ushered in a new generation of 3D video games, and one of the first games announced for the console was Resident Evil Code Veronica. Sega's system hit Japan in November of 1998, shortly after the fourth Resident Evil was announced. Production Studio 4 handled the artistic design, but the bulk of the development was overseen by a division of Sega called the Nextech Corporation, with scenario work by Flagship Studios. Capcom initially slated it for a late 1999 release, but the next chapter in both Claire and Chris Redfield's story didn't materialize until February 3rd of 2000. Code Veronica had a more developed plot than any of the three Resident Evils that preceded it, introducing new characters and conspiracies. It picked up the story 3 months after Raccoon City got the nuclear treatment. The trio from RE2 had split up, as evidenced by Claire Redfield taking the fight to Umbrella by herself. She was captured breaking into one of their facilities in Paris and transported to a high-security prison on Rockford Island. During her incarceration, the military complex experienced a textbook Umbrella outbreak, ranging from mindless zombies to plus-sized monsters. The security officer guarding the prison, Rodrigo, let Claire go free, figuring they were all gonna die anyway. Claire quickly befriended another fugitive named Steve Burnside. The cocky kid wanted to make it on his own, but would frequently reappear to show off.
Oh yeah, that felt good!
He was originally brought to the base with his father, who was somehow infected by one of the undead. Mr. Burnside got the drop on Steve and Claire when a walkway collapsed beneath them, and the son was forced to put the father to rest. Steve was obviously infatuated with Claire, but escaping the island superseded any opportunity to do something about it.
There was a friendly but naive king who wed a very nasty queen. The king was loved, but the queen was feared.
Claire would soon discover her incarceration on Rockford was rather fortuitous for someone who was looking to uncover Umbrella's darkest secrets. Towering over the infested installation was the former home of Edward Ashford, co-founder of the pharmaceutical giant. His grandson Alfred stood watch over the property and threatened Claire with haughty words and a sniper rifle. Alfred's sister Alexia was rumored to have inherited the brains of the family, but as Claire and Steve discovered, she was currently just a figment of Alfred's severed mind. In truth, Alexia and her father Alexander were both resting in an abandoned complex somewhere on the massive iceberg of Antarctica. Claire temporarily escaped Alfred's grasp as Steve flew her off of Rockford. A new model Tyrant stowed away in the back, but his demise was a short-lived victory as the aircraft was redirected to Alexia's frozen underground complex. There, Claire faced off against the shell of Alexander Ashford, nicknamed Nosferatu. Steve finally put a bullet or two in Alfred, and the pair drove off in a snowmobile. The horizon beckoned, but a newly awakened Alexia had other ideas. With Claire's fate in question, players shifted to controlling her brother Chris. While he technically backtracked through the entire game, Rockford Island was badly damaged, and new sections of the Antarctic base opened up. Some of these new areas strangely mirrored rooms from the Spencer Mansion in the original Resident Evil, suggesting one was an inspiration for the other. Upon discovering his sister, Chris was introduced to the two endgame villains, Alexia Ashford and Albert Wesker. Both had juiced up on some type of performance enhancement, vaguely explaining Wesker's immortality and Alexia's appearance. Alexia had also performed fatal tests on Steve, who confessed his feelings in a tearful farewell. Players were able to silence Alexia's mutated form, but had to settle on fighting Super Wesker another day. Code Veronica was a revolution for the franchise because for the first time, all of the game's environments were three-dimensional. Instead of a locked camera obscuring you from the threat at hand, the perspective moved with you. While it made the environments look empty when compared to prior games, the trade-off was worth it for the leap in control and immersion. You were able to fire two of the game's weapons in first person, and there were more gun parts, explosive powder for the rapid-fire crossbow, and some dual-handed guns that could take down two targets at the same time. Exclusive monsters eager to deplete this brand new ammo reserve included the shock-inducing Albinoid, a T-virus-infused salamander, parasite-spitting moths that encased a few unlucky scientists, arm-extending Bandersnatches, another gigantic burrowing worm, and zombies that had somehow been strapped with explosives. Wesker also deployed mobile scanners to search for Chris Redfield that rang a hunter whenever the laser was tripped. Pesky insects were also found scattered around a few of the later areas, and bugs in general appeared as a predominant theme throughout the game. The importance of family was a constant undertone. There was an obvious parallel between the brother-sister pairing of Chris and Claire and Alfred and Alexia. Both extremes of the relationship were explored. One brother overcame the unthinkable to rescue his little sister, and the other cracked under the pressure after many years of obsessing over his superior sibling. Although the Redfields triumphed over the Ashfords, it was clear the legacy left by Alfred and Alexia's ancestors had already taken its toll. Code Veronica sold nearly 3 million copies and received a revised port for the PS2 and Gamecube called Code Veronica X, or Complete Edition in Japan. The new version had a few graphical tweaks, including a new hairdo for Steve Burnside. Both versions included an unlockable battle game similar to the fourth Survivor, where popular characters were guided through specific sections at maximum speed. Only now, all enemies had to be destroyed before moving on, and it could be played in first person. The minigame, along with beating the game in record time, opened up exclusive rocket launchers. Over 9 minutes of extended cutscenes were also slipped into Veronica X. They gave Albert Wesker the stage, easing him gently into the narrative. Wesker's intentions were also cleared up a bit in his report, released with X to commemorate the 5th anniversary of the franchise. The two-part documentary and his appearance on Rockford revealed Wesker was a man of many secrets. Who was he working for? And when would we see him again? While Code Veronica technically wasn't Resident Evil 3, it was definitely Resident Evil 3.0. It foreshadowed even more drastic jumps the series would take to forge an evolving identity in the horror genre, as opposed to a string of sequels that were just standing still. But what fans would see next wasn't Resident Evil 4, as that elusive numbered entry was still 5 years off. At Tokyo Game Show in 2000, Capcom revealed it was taking Resident Evil back in time. They planned the series' first prequel for the Nintendo 64, but when that generation picked up and moved on, the project was bumped to the Gamecube to compete with a complete remake of the first game. Resident Evil 0 was released on November 10th, 2002. Just like its title implied, RE0 detailed the events that occurred right before RE1, and gamers apparently had a lot to learn. What they already knew was that the STARS Bravo team had been sent to the Arklay Mountains to investigate a rash of gruesome murders. Of the 7 Bravo team members, the only one to make it back was 18-year-old Rebecca Chambers. What they didn't know was after Bravo's chopper made a rough landing, she found and boarded a stalled locomotive called the Ecliptic Express. Like the Spencer Mansion, the Express was teeming with zombies. Trapped inside with the train rolling at a breakneck pace, Rebecca was greeted by former Marine Billy Cohen. Rebecca instantly recognized him from a police report stating he murdered 23 innocent people. But facing a train of walking corpses, Rebecca teamed up with Billy in the interest of not being eaten.
Why don't we cooperate?
Cooperate with you?
The duo managed to derail the train while somehow surviving the spectacular crash, and found themselves underneath a training complex that, like the train, was inhabited by the undead.
Thank you.
Don't mention it. Just keeping my word. We promised to cooperate with each other. Remember?
This strange partnership was the basis of Zero's major gameplay changes. Resident Evil had experimented with cooperative characters before, but now you could switch between playing Rebecca and Billy at will. Numerous puzzles hinged on where each character was, and what items were in their possession. The second hero technically opened up 6 more inventory spaces, and to balance it, Capcom removed the universal storage containers. Managing the inventory became a desperate situation given how many items you had to pick up, and the possibility of the pair being spontaneously separated.
This way.
Roger.
Players could exchange ammo or quest articles between Rebecca and Billy, and leave unwanted items on the floor of whatever room they were in. The item would stay there indefinitely, allowing the two to make inventory adjustments on the fly. The weapons were standard fare, with the exception of the new Molotov cocktails. Having a second gun at their side helped players navigate through the alarming number of brand new creatures. Leading the charge was an army of leeches that could collect into something resembling a human form. They were backed up by crazy primates, mutant frogs, and oversized cockroaches, along with a giant scorpion, centipede, and bat that served as the intermittent bosses. Rebecca even traded blows with a proto-tyrant, the earliest model of the T-Virus BOW. Unlike Code Veronica, the camera remained somewhat stagnant, only panning left and right for larger-sized rooms. Despite the return to a rigid perspective, Rebecca now had to think vertically by using the hook shot at exposed holes in the ceiling. This triggered a need to discover angles previously ignored, but veteran zombie killers might have also noticed Zero crossed over a couple of areas seen in Resident Evil 2. With fans still clamoring for a remake of that game, this tease is currently as good as it gets. Every step, Rebecca and Billy were being monitored by facility managers Albert Wesker and William Birkin. Birkin was finalizing his research on the G-Virus, and Wesker was planning his betrayal of STARS. The Umbrella operatives viewed the two zombie killers as a minor annoyance, with the real threat coming from a mysterious figure somehow directing the actions of the leech mass that was infesting the complex. Discarded files brought up the name James Marcus, the former director of the facility. evidence pointed to Marcus having died years earlier, but the final confrontation revealed the scientist was alive and well, or so it seemed. Marcus almost died previously after being double-crossed by his two colleagues Wesker and Birkin. The crown jewel of his research, a queen leech, consumed his dying remains and spent nearly a decade reviving his thoughts and memories. His revenge plot not only caused the train incident, but the Spencer Mansion outbreak as well. Marcus lashed out in anger, evolving into two combined forms of his leech brethren. Rebecca and Billy managed to lure the beast to the surface and, under a bath of white-hot sunlight, delivered the kill shot. As is mandatory in a Resident Evil ending, the facility was incinerated as the two survivors made it to safety. Rebecca agreed to conceal Billy's involvement, saying he died in the explosion. After a salute, she walked right into a nearby house. And another nightmare. Resident Evil 0 sold 1.25 million copies, received average to excellent review scores, and was ported to the Japanese Wii in 2008. Finishing the game on any difficulty opened up Leech Hunter, a collectathon following Billy and Rebecca and their unlockable costumes on a quest to pick up as many shinies as they could in a short time. The more leeches they found, the more weapons gained unlimited ammo in the single-player campaign. Arriving 8 months after the remake of the original Resident Evil, fans were already anticipating the glossy graphics the Gamecube was capable of, thus lightening Zero's visual impact when compared to Code Veronica. A lot of players also found the absence of storage bins a painful sacrifice, even with the ability to exchange and drop items. The many faults in this method were no more evident than their exclusion from Resident Evil 4. The game's strongest resonance, however, came from its eye-opening story. Not only were fans introduced to the tearful tale of James Marcus, but also the fact that Marcus, Wesker, Birkin, Spencer, and Ashford were all former co-workers, each with their hand in the events that would come to destroy Raccoon City. The conspiracy was uncovered, and the guilty had been punished. Except for one. The biohazard that Capcom began breaks loose. The terror-filled franchise spawns two others that opened up the survival possibilities. One let players take a shot at the dead from first person, and the other proved that, in a zombie apocalypse, few make it to safety alone.